Kate Neal-Falcha, welcome to Irishgrannyhelen, and it's time for our Saturday book. And we are going to continue in Going Hollywood, Midwesterners in Movie Land by Sara Jordan-Heintz. And last week we did the King of Hollywood, Clark Gable, and we did his wife, Carol Lombard. My mind went blank. Carol Lombard. And we're now on chapter 3, and we're going to do the glorious Jean Harlow. Kansas City bombshell, as Sara calls her. So she was very much the distracting sex symbol during the Depression. She was what people went to see at the theater to forget their troubles. She was often ill. People didn't know this about her. She had something wrong with her, physically wrong with her for a long time, something chronic. And they really didn't know what it was, or they didn't reveal what it was. And it was bad because she was so young, too. Her mother took care of her. Her mother was kind of, stage mom. She took care of her. And she often dated much older men. She was childlike. People loved her. People around her, her family, friends, people who worked with her, people who worked for her, they all loved her and they called her baby. So I get the feeling she was infantilized somewhat. However, like Marilyn Monroe, like Clark Gable, like other people we're going to read about, she was a budding intellectual. She was often seen with books. She wasn't like Clark Gable, who hid his book reading. He didn't let anyone take photographs of him with a book in his hand. Jean Harlow just did what she did, and she was not what her image would imply. The blonde bombshell. There was a lot more to her, a lot more going on up here. She was a budding novelist. She wrote for quite a long time. She longed to be taken seriously for her heart and her brain. She was great at sewing and cooking and entertaining friends. She was a homebody. She was one of the very first female stars of the talkies. And when sound came out in the late 1920s, some of the stars of silent films sort of fell by the wayside. And for a handful, it was their accent or their delivery or the tone of their voice. But for others, their cinematic allure just didn't translate. The whole nature of talking films was different. Silent films, they were more physical comedy. And so how you acted had to be reined in. There was less slapstick in comedy. There was less hamming it up in drama. And so they didn't all translate well. Some did, but not all of them. She was in a movie. Her first big kind of breakthrough movie was Hell's Angels, produced by Howard Hughes. She became one of MGM's most popular and lucrative stars. And the love of her life was William Powell. It seems like William Powell got around. Love of her life was William Powell. She died suddenly at only 26 years old, and her death is still surrounded by controversy. So let's look at her life. She was born March 3rd, 1911. That's a long time ago. 1911 in Kansas City, Missouri. Her name was Harleen Carpenter. Her dad was a dentist. Her mother was an aspiring actress / stage mother. Her parents were divorced in 1922, and her dad bowed out. He just, later, he was gone. She would often spend her summer vacations at her maternal grandparents' estate. They had money and they had lots of animals. She moved briefly with her mother, Jean, to Hollywood because her mother had aspirations, and then ended up going to Chicago when that didn't work out. At the age of 14, she got spinal scarlet fever, and then spent a year with spinal meningitis. And I just have this feeling that this was the source of her ill health as an adult. But that's just me speculating. In 1926, her mother married a crook, and he lived off of her mother, Jean, and pretended to be a family man, but he was an abusive gangster. But Jean Harlow benefited actually from that because she got sent to an exclusive fancy girls' school paid for by her grandparents called Terry Hall, and maybe it's Ferry Hall. I can't read my writing. Which was known for its vigorous academics. It was an all-girls school. It was exclusive, and it probably did a lot to nurture her intellectual abilities. Her relationship with her mother was a little bit, I wouldn't say unconventional, because you hear about this all the time, but it was not necessarily the healthiest. Her mother was her best friend, but never really was like a parent to her. Jean herself never had a boyfriend. She wore heels and lipstick at school, which did not go down well. Now, keep in mind, this would have been in the very early 20s. She was bullied, but eventually she became the confidant of some of these girls. She was a lazy student who aced her exams. She didn't need to study. One of those, didn't need to study. As opposed to those of us who burnt the candle at both ends studying for, Anyway, by the age of 16, she was, as Sara puts it in the book, good with men. She fell in love with a 19-year-old member of a prominent family, Charles F. McGrew III, and they were married September 21st of 1927. Now, keep in mind, she'd never had a boyfriend. She had no experience in negotiating gender politics, male-female relationships, okay, we'll get married. And at the age of 21, he inherited a fortune. So this is just a recipe for disaster. And they bought a big house in Beverly Hills. She didn't work. Neither did he. They had money. They played. Their life was one continual party. Her mother and stepfather moved nearby. There's a shock. One day she offered to drive a friend to Fox Studios where the friend worked. The friend talked her into being an extra in the film that day. And at first she was really scared. She didn't want to do it, but she did sign up to do it as Jean Harlow. She took her mother's maiden name and her mother's first name, so enmeshed, right? But she declined a lot of parts because she was nervous, so she was not the one with the burning ambition. Her mother was. But she got an offer from Paramount. There was something about her on the screen. And in 1928, she signed with Hal Roach and made $12 a day. But she got no screen credit. A lot of times, a lot of these famous actors and actresses, when they started out, got no credit for their earlier work. She got small parts with Laurel and Hardy, with Clara Bow, the It Girl, with Maurice Chevalier, and with Jeanette MacDonald. She did all those light operas, The Student Prince and Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy. If you remember When I'm Calling You, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police movie. They were divorced, she and her husband, in 1929. She claimed that he was profane and abusive. She posed for lewd pictures and was not a proper wife, is what he said about her. And later on, she was pretty realistic about it. She said, we were too young. She was 18. He was 21. She tested for the movie Hell's Angels, and she caught the eye of Howard Hughes. He wanted her for the role. She got the role in the most expensive film made to date. She made quite the impression on Howard Hughes. It's a World War II film. Hughes flew the stunts and crashed the plane. 2 other stunt flyers and a mechanic were killed. Millions of feet of film were scrapped. It went obscenely over budget. Hughes had the reputation for being an obsessive. It had some Technicolor in it, which was the only colored film then at the time. It was provocative and risque. This was the movie with the line, I'm going to slip into something more comfortable. That was considered very risque. Okay. It was released after 3 years, May 24th, 1930, at Grauman's Chinese Theater. Hughes, infamous for being a man who could make an entrance, brought in arc lighting to illuminate the street leading to the theater, had a fighter squadron fly overhead, and a crowd of 50,000 spectators, and he invited celebrities, so many that it required the Los Angeles police force to bring in the National Guard. God. She was in a cold sweat at the premiere. At first, she was compared to Clara Bow. But Jean Harlow was not a comedian, and she was the first light blonde, that bleached blonde, to not be a comedian. I don't know about that. Oh well. Never mind. She had a 5-year contract with RKO and Hughes, and they loaned her out to uncredited parts in a number of different movies with different studios. After the movie Platinum Blonde, she dyed her hair, and that became the rage. Joan Blondell was who I was thinking of about no light blonde being a comedian. Trying to think about that. Jean Harlow. These were relatively, well, until Platinum Blonde, were relatively serious movies she was in. But Joan Blondell was a platinum blonde, and I'm trying to think, maybe she came slightly after Jean Harlow because she copied the look. But she did comedic parts and serious parts. I love Joan Blondell. Okay. So this blonde hair became the rage, and Hughes offered $10,000 for any hairstylist who could match Jean Harlow's exact dye color. And part of the look that made her Jean Harlow was actually her makeup. She had this sort of baby doll makeup. Let's see if I can get a picture of it. Well, this picture, it's not a good sized picture, but it kind of gives you this sort of painted, it's almost geisha-like. Very stylized makeup. And keep in mind, this is the late 20s, early 30s. Nice girls didn't do that. She became a beauty icon, and she's even copied today. I mean, we all know the famous look that copied her. In an interview, she made a point of saying that she didn't like the vamp roles that she played. You know, she had all these sort of alluring, provocative roles, and she actually wanted something more serious and dramatic. She was articulate. She was well-informed. She wanted to play dramatic parts, not harlots. Quote, I've never been mixed up with gangsters. I preferred tennis. But at the time, you know, Hollywood was obsessed with the gangland stuff, you know, Al Capone and all those guys. MGM writer and producer Paul Byrne got Irving Thalberg to buy out her contract from Hughes. Signed her to MGM on April 20th, 1932. And she got the role in a movie called Red-Headed Woman. She had to wear a red wig. This was the first script ever written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which, you know, weird to think about him as a screenwriter, but he was. And then it was rewritten by Anita Luce. I think Anita Luce wrote the book Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. If I remember right, she kind of a bit of a flapper who became a journalist. Jean Harlow's stepfather, whose name was Bello, his last name, he acted as her manager. Of course he did. He and Byrne didn't like each other. He introduced her to a member of Meyer Lansky's mob, Longy Zwillman, who wined and dined her. The rumor was Bello wanted into the mob because he wanted to open a Manhattan speakeasy, and he used her as collateral. Harlow and Byrne became an item, and on July 2nd, 1932, she was 21 and he was 42. They got married. She lived in his house in Benedict Canyon rather than, you know, wherever it was she lived before. He gifted her the house. He put it in her name. Their only recorded fight was because she didn't like the seclusion of the house. It was Benedict Canyon, you know, it's pretty rustic-y. The studio and her family felt that he was too old for baby. Quote, Paul's advice, wisdom, and understanding were the greatest influences in my life, she said. She was too attached to her mother. She would have her mother over for sleepovers. I don't know. I just think it's weird. So here we go. Here's why I think it's weird. Her over-attachment to Mama Jean made mother-daughter sleepovers a common occurrence. On the evening of September 4th, 1932, 2 months into their marriage, Jean bid Paul farewell and left their home, embarking on dinner and an overnight stay with her mother and stepfather. As housekeeper Winifred Carmichael was leaving the Byrne residence that night, on her way to meet up with Jean at the Bello home, she saw a car pull up to the house. Upon returning to the Byrne home later in the evening, she claimed to have heard Paul arguing with a woman at the pool, saying, "Get out of my life," followed by a female scream. She discovered a wet yellow swimsuit abandoned on the patio. A silhouette of a woman ran across the property and disappeared into a waiting car, her identity belonging to the night. Nonplussed, Winifred retired to her private quarters. So, you know, get the scenario. This maid is leaving for a while and sees a car pull up, doesn't know whose it is, comes back later and hears fighting and screaming, and there's a bathing suit by the pool, which is obviously, you know, some woman was naked in the pool, and then sees a woman running into a car and leaving. The following morning, Labor Day Monday, gardener Clifton Davis found a broken and bloodied champagne glass in the home. Worried someone had been injured, Winifred's husband, John, who worked as butler and chauffeur for Byrne, went looking for the master and mistress of the house. Jean was still at her mother's home. She had been gone this whole time. John walked into the master bedroom and located Mr. Byrne, and John fainted at the sight. Clifton then entered the room, discovered John and his employer both on the floor, and approached Byrne's nude, contorted body. The writer at the movie colony's most prestigious studio had sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the head. So what did they do? They called the studio. They didn't call the police. They called the studio. Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg were there first, and MGM's private police force investigated the whole thing. MGM publicity head Howard Strickling and Eddie Mannix, the fixer, got control of the public information. They withheld any negative stories about this, and they only released those authorized to be given to the press. Strickland was a press agent for MGM, and his motto was suppress agent. So he and Eddie Mannix, well, let me read it from here. Okay. Samuel Marks was an MGM producer who, was all up in the situation. And he wrote a book in 1990 about Paul Byrne's death. And he said in the early hours of 1932's Labor Day, Strickling had to determine how Paul Byrne's death would be presented to the press. It was imperative that the tragedy not cause harm to Jean Harlow. And if carried out successfully, it might even enhance her career. A handwritten letter was found on Byrne's dresser, immediately labeled a self-harm note. It reads, "Dearest dear, unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you and to wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you, Paul." Added at the end is the haunting line, "You understand that last night was only a comedy." While arousing, the note was not dated and not specifically addressed to Jean. Nevertheless, the press swarmed the Bello residence looking for the newly widowed Harlow, and she refused to see them. Very enigmatic. It's kind of like the John Benet Ramsey letter, who really wrote it, right? Coroner's inquest was whitewashed, and the story was agreed upon that he did it himself because of his depression. The inquest was headed by the DA, Burton Fitz, who was later charged with bribery and perjury. Jean refused to speak to the press, and she did attend the funeral. Byrne's brother revealed that he'd lived with a woman a long time ago as though she were his wife, which makes her a common law wife. Her name was Dorothy Millette, that she'd been trying to get in touch with him and that he'd been expecting her to visit. Samuel Marks, this is the guy who worked for the studio, told this story. Paul confessed that Dorothy had been in a coma for 10 years. He walked out and began a new life. But after 10 years, she woke up, and she still thought that they were in a relationship. Marks inferred that the word coma really meant schizophrenia, that she had been locked up for mental illness, and that they'd lived together for 5 years before this as a couple in Algonquin, New York, which in the laws of the time and place made it a common law marriage. This was a rumor, but there was no proof. They said that they got married in Canada. May of 1932, she moved to San Francisco and contacted Paul. So, surprise, she got monthly checks from him. Jean Harlow discovered that she was in a sort of a bigamist relationship. Like, nobody seems to know quite for sure what the standing was. MGM spun a story that Paul did himself in to spare both women the scandal. Then evidence came out that Dorothy had hired a car and was paid for by Byrne. Records showed that it left Byrne's home the night of his death. She went to San Francisco, packed a trunk, left it at a hotel desk, took a steamboat to Sacramento, but on arrival, she wasn't on board the steamboat. The police dredged the river, and fishermen found her body. The sheriff said as soon as the body was found, MGM people rode into Sacramento like a thundering herd. Then her hotel room was found and ransacked, and her personal belongings were missing. Her death was listed as self-harm by the coroner, and there was a quiet burial. 4 days before his death, Byrne applied for an $85,000 life insurance for Jean to receive, and it was voided because of cause of death. Rumors were that Jean was there that night. Did she find him with Dorothy? He was found nude. Did she do him in a rage? Did Dorothy run for her life? Was she actually fleeing? Was she the victim of a hitman from MGM? Was Dorothy dead of her own hand because of the guilt of shooting Paul? Rumor was that Louis B. Mayer was the first on the scene and he wrote the note, or that the note was written by Paul weeks earlier after a fight and had absolutely nothing to do with that night. Mayer spread the rumor that Paul had been impotent, and that was the problem. Mayer was powerful, God, apparently. Journalists appeased him, and they just accepted what he said. November 26th of 1932, Adela Rogers St. John, we've heard before from her, got the first interview with Harlow. Published in Liberty Magazine, November 26th of 1932, St. John claimed it was the medical man who revealed the fact that Jean Harlow could have been a wife in name only. It was the autopsy, the coroner's inquest, which dragged forth the fact that Paul Byrne could never have consummated their marriage. Then St. John claimed that Paul's previous girlfriend said if they married, that he would do himself in 6 months. Rumor was he dated many glamorous stars as a cover story. Jean spoke of her shock upon learning of her husband's death, saying she had no warning, no reason to think of such a thing. We were so happy. When asked about the note, she said that she knew of its contents, but had not seen it. Whether or not Jean could truly attest to Paul's impotence or had been pressured into going along with the story, Adela quoted her as saying, Paul knew that didn't make any difference. He knew I loved him. I made him know it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Something might have mattered, but it didn't. Interesting. So he died while she was making red dust. And that helped ease her grief. Clark Gable had a lot to do with that. And then the next movie, too. Then she made dinner at 8. Her gown had to be sewn on her. She had to have a leaning board to lean up against because she couldn't sit. Gossip tied her to Max Baer, the boxer, but instead she had a relationship with a cinematographer for the movie Bombshell, a guy called Harold Rawson, who was 16 years older than she. They married September 17th of 1933, but they divorced in the spring of 34. So it just sounds like they weren't even married 6 months. They called themselves good friends. Reckless, that movie she made with her boyfriend, William Powell. Art imitated life. She played a woman accused of killing her husband. Powell was 19 years older, and they became the new it couple. They worked 20 hours a day. Then she had one day off in which she bleached her hair, which took all day. She did not wear makeup when she was not on screen. She was working on a novel, Today is Tonight. Other hit films that she made, there's a list of them, and she was beloved by the MGM crews. They all called her baby. She was unpretentious and generous with money. But she was often unwell. She had severe sunburn, chronic nephritis, which is an infection of the kidneys. She wanted marriage and children with Powell, but he didn't. She made Libeled Lady in her last full movie, Personal Property. She was invited with co-star Robert Taylor to FDR's inaugural ball. And on the train home, she got the flu. She began filming the movie Saratoga in New York. She had 3 impacted wisdom teeth and ended up in the hospital for a month. She was looking terrible during the filming, bloated, ashen, sweating, short of breath. In May 29th, 1937, she collapsed while rehearsing the scene with Walter Pidgeon. They took her home. She was seen by a doctor at home and was told she had flu. Clark Gable visited and said, this is gross, but he said he could smell urine on her breath, that she was in kidney failure. This is what Clark Gable said. Powell had her taken to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, where she slipped into a coma and died on June 17th of acute uremic poisoning. So Clark Gable was right. Her funeral was by invitation only, but thousands of fans were outside. And on her crypt, it said, "Our baby." She was only 26, and she left $100,000 to her mother. They finished the movie with a body double. There were lots of rumors that she'd had an abortion, that she had problems with alcohol, that she was denied care because her mother was a Christian Scientist. On the day she collapsed on the set, she had told a makeup artist, whose name was Violet, "You know, Violet, I have a feeling I'm going away from here and will never come back." And 2 hours later, she became ill on the set. Her mother sold the film rights to MGM, but not the movie. Oh, I didn't write everything down. Sold the film rights to her book to MGM, but they never made a movie. Her elderly father sued the author of a book about her, calling it lies from her agent. William Powell agreed with the father that the agent who wrote the book knew her very, very little. She was leered at by some of Hollywood's most famous producers and hounded continually for her morals by anti-indecency campaigners who dubbed her the filthiest woman ever to have set foot in Hollywood. With her image tarnished by the salacious book that came out and films, former colleagues such as MGM's executive Ralph Wheelwright gave their views on what Harlow had been like. "She didn't have a mean bone in her body," he reflected. "Money meant nothing to her, and while she didn't like her stepfather, she put up with him for her mother's sake. She had class." Jeanette MacDonald, actress and prolific opera singer who sang at Jean's funeral, said Harlow always played such sluts on the screen. At heart, she was really a naive, nice girl who was being exploited and wanted just to be somebody's wife. She was a very unhappy young girl. Toni Rennell wrote that her mother was controlling to the point of madness, and her stepfather was a gun-toting pervert who climbed up ladders to spy on his naked, sleeping stepdaughter. She herself was drawn to middle-aged men who let her down instead of giving her the love she craved. She was the antithesis of the hard-boiled characters she played on the screen, William Powell remembered of his lover. She was shy and gentle. Perhaps the reason she was so excellent in her films was because, being so nice in real life, she was able to get rid of her frustrations in her work. MGM writer Harry Ruskin recalled the doleful atmosphere hanging over the studio after Harlow's passing. "The day the baby died, there wasn't one sound in the commissary for 3 hours. Not one goddamn sound." So sad. I think we'll do another one. Chapter 4. Spencer Tracy, A Life on the Rocks. That's a little pun, which we'll get to. Star of one of my favorite movies ever made, Father of the Bride, the original Father of the Bride, with Spencer Tracy, Joan Collins, and Joan Bennett, and Elizabeth Taylor. Okay, Spencer Tracy, A Life on the Rocks. He was known for his natural, understated acting. He was revered by his colleagues. He was an actor's actor. He had 9 Academy Award nominations, and he won 2 years in a row. His public persona was a regular guy. He was devoted to his family. David Niven called him the Pope. He was a real man, but he was submerged in a bottle. He had a real problem with alcohol. Tracy suffered from crippling alcoholism. crippling depression, insomnia, bellicosity, pathological insecurity, abuse of alcohol and pills that blended into a Molotov cocktail served on the rocks. Sara, kudos, that is a fantastic sentence. He was the walking definition of a man grappling with Catholic guilt. For 25 years, he had a relationship with Katharine Hepburn, a bohemian, feminist, liberal atheist. They made 9 movies together. Their relationship never was acknowledged until he died. They had a deep friendship. Hepburn was devoted to him. She was long-suffering. But his wife would not give him a divorce. So he clung to his marriage out of loyalty and a moral obligation. But, Hepburn had no interest in getting married, so that kind of worked out. Tracy was born April 5th, 1900 in Milwaukee. His name was, this is great, Spencer Bonaventure Tracy. His dad was an Irish Roman Catholic drinker. I guess drinker was his profession. I don't know. His mother was a Presbyterian from people who established Brown University. He had a strict religious upbringing. He went to Roman Catholic schools. He was an altar boy. His father wanted a son to become a priest. But he was a bad student. He was always in fights. He was expelled 13 to 18 times. There's a little debate. His family had financial problems. He said he only went to school to be able to read subtitles in silent movies. Then he met Bill O'Brien, who was a very serious Marquette student. Bill wanted to be an actor. Tracy wanted to be like him. His parents enrolled him in Marquette. He was excellent at theology. He considered the priesthood, but at 18, he dropped out and entered the Navy. But before he could get his full training, World War I ended. That's how old he was. It was World War I he was entering. In the next year, he was discharged. They didn't need him anymore. He had never been in a boat. He was in the Navy and had never been in a boat. So he went home and he got his high school diploma. He was really too young to be in the military, but in 1921, he went to Ripon College to study medicine and debate. But he discovered the plays and he changed to dramatics as his major. He entered the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. He met up again with his friend Bill, but Bill was now calling himself Pat O'Brien, the actor. They became roommates. They shared one good suit. Tracy graduated from the academy and joined West Plains, New York Stock Company. So, you know how they traveled around very much like vaudeville. And on the train to his next acting job in Grand Rapids, he met Louise Treadwell, a refined, established actress who was 4 years his senior. Within 6 weeks, they were engaged and they got married in Cincinnati between the matinee and the evening show. She was an Episcopalian. They had a son, John, born June 26, 1924. She stayed home and he had the full financial burden. He loved to act. He didn't like to work. But he got a role with George M. Cohan. And George M. Cohan became his mentor. He called Tracy the best goddamn actor I've ever seen. Louise discovered that their son was deaf. She figured it out over a few months' time. She was afraid to tell Spencer while visiting him on location, because he was gone all the time. While visiting him on location, he figured it out and cried. At that time, people believed the deaf would never be able to learn to speak. Both of them really suffered over this. There was just so much lack of understanding and stigma around any sort of physical disability in those days that, you know, it's hard to understand now. She consulted doctors and he drank. He went on a multi-day bender and he blamed himself Well, he gave his wife VD while she was pregnant, and he blamed himself. But as it turns out, they later discovered that their son John had Usher syndrome, which is a recessive genetic disorder causing deafness and eventually blindness. And then this poor kid couldn't catch a break. At 6, he got polio, which damaged his right leg, too. But they refused to institutionalize him, which is what they would have done. I mean, he was perfectly compos mentis, but Spencer struggled to provide through acting. But his father was dying, and he got a big role in a play, and he went on. Even after hearing that his father had died, he went on and performed. Then he took over a role for Clark Gable, who was a longtime rival, but eventually they did become friends. I guess they were a type at the time. His play got rave reviews, and the next day the stock market crashed and the play lost all its funding. But he got lucky and got a new role, and he did great in it. And they moved to Hollywood, and he got a part in 2 short films. So there was not necessarily an overlap at the time, early in Hollywood, between stage work and film work. Stage actors thought they were real actors, and they looked down on film actors, but very much the same way film actors looked down on TV for a while. So John Ford was so impressed with Spencer Tracy that he got a 5-year contract at $70,000 a year in those days. He had steady work. He made a number of movies with mixed success. June of 1932, they had a daughter. April of 1933, they separated, and it was amicable, but they wouldn't get divorced because of their religious beliefs. She encouraged him to see other women. Louise did. He had an affair with 21-year-old Loretta Young, so I guess he and Clark Gable competed for more than movies. He was too guilt-ridden to get divorced. The rumor was that Loretta Young was the love of his life. She was a fanatical Roman Catholic, so, they had that. They went to confession on Saturday and Mass on Sunday as kind of a weekend date. Match made in heaven, literally. One Saturday, the priest refused to give her absolution because she confessed about her affair and his troubles. She was told to come every Friday night for counseling, alone, without him. Oh, God. June of 1933, they broke up. Tracy said, it was all platonic anyway. The truth was that he wouldn't leave his wife. The Roman Catholic Church would not marry them because there was no such thing as divorce. When old, she said she hadn't known that he was married until she already had fallen in love with him. And then she got pregnant by Gable. After they split up, he reconciled with his wife. He was in 22 movies between 32 and 34. In 35, the drinking got the worst of him. He missed rehearsals. He didn't report on set on time to begin shooting. He got arrested at a hotel in Yuma, Arizona for drunk, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, destroying public property, and he got fired by Fox. On the same day, he signed a contract with MGM. Louis B. Mayer was not happy, but Thalberg insisted. He remained sober because he knew he had a good deal with MGM, and their micromanagement suited him. It kept him on the straight and narrow. He was a chronic insomniac because he consumed so much coffee in order to not drink alcohol. He had severe depression. He took barbiturates to sleep and Dexedrine to stay awake. That'll help your mood. He got nominated for Best Supporting Actor for the movie San Francisco. And then he was in Libeled Lady with Harlow and Powell and Myrna Loy. In 36, he made enough money to buy a Mexican ranch in Encino. Mexican ranch. I wonder what a Mexican ranch is. If it's in Encino is it's in the San Fernando Valley. They had horses, a pool, animals, maybe style, like a hacienda style. It was his sanctuary, but he spent less and less time there because he lived in hotels. Meanwhile, Louise got training in how to teach deaf children, and she taught her son to talk. She formed the first women's polo team on the West Coast and wrote poetry and articles for New York Times. Louise had it going on. She was still friends with Tracy, but they had no romantic relationship. Tracy was emotionally attached to her. Tracy's colleague, the famed director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, Josh Mankiewicz of Dateline fame, his grandfather, I think, he theorized that Tracy didn't leave Louise. He left the scene of his guilt. Oh, okay. It is a Mexican style ranch. I just didn't write the word style down. Okay. In 1937, he did 4 movies and he got Best Actor. He didn't think he'd win, so instead he went into the hospital for a hernia repair. When he was awarded the Oscar, Louise attended and accepted it for him. He was the first choice for Father Flanagan in the movie Boys Town. So saccharine. So he often tried to wiggle out of roles at the last minute. It was called the Spencer Tracy syndrome. He did it so often. He reconsidered to make his father proud, even though his father was dead, because his father wanted him to be a priest, so he got to be a priest in a movie. He followed Father Flanagan for a week to copy his mannerisms and stuff. He won the Oscar, and he gave Flanagan credit. The press got it wrong. They thought Tracy was going to give the statue to Flanagan and, said so publicly. And he was like, I'm keeping it for myself. So MGM made a duplicate and gave it to the priest because the movie was a success. But then donors dried up to the Boys Town because the movie was such a success. They thought they didn't need any more money. And so MGM kind of had to give money. They gave $250,000 to Boys Town to keep it open because they felt responsible for its drying up of its donations. Kevin Hepburn was labeled box office poison, and she left Hollywood to act on the stage. She was a modern woman. She valued her mind over her looks. She was not a glamour girl. She played herself. And in 1939, she did return to make the Philadelphia Story. It was a smash hit. She took the role in Woman of the Year only if Tracy would be in it. She felt he would be the best, and it was okay with him to give her top billing, and he agreed to that. Where am I here? She was willing to give him top billing, and he agreed to that. Of course he did. While Kate had seen all of Spencer's movies, some of them dozens of times, he was less familiar with her acting. They met for the first time on the set, and as the story goes, the statuesque Hepburn approached her new co-star and said, "I'm afraid I'm a bit tall for you, Mr. Tracy." And Joseph L. Mankiewicz quipped, "Don't worry, Kate. He'll cut you down to size." The late columnist Liz Smith confirmed that, before that. That was the first of 9 films they made together, and by the end of filming number 1, they were living together, and they kept that out of the press, and they didn't let Louise know. At lunchtime, they would go out together and sit on a bench and hold hands and talk, and everyone left them alone in their own private world. This is what Gene Kelly said. However, there was a long time rumor that Katharine Hepburn was lesbian and that he was bisexual. And their relationship was a smokescreen for their individual pursuits. I'd forgotten I read that. In Full Service, by Bowers, the procurer for the stars. Okay, Full Service is the name of this publication by somebody called Bowers, the procurer for the stars. Publicly wrote, I fixed her, Hepburn, up with 150 girls over 39 years. Liz Smith confirmed all this. The columnist Liz Smith confirmed that Hepburn was gay. Former Vanity Fair writer Matt Tiernauer, who has extensively researched the subject, commented recently, people are in willful suspension of belief about this supposed golden couple. Well, it's just interesting, you know, worked for them. Meanwhile, Louise opened the John Tracy Clinic at USC. It's very famous. It's like the cutting edge of clinic for hearing. And you can go there if you have a hearing issue for children. You can go there for free. And at first it was funded just by Tracy's movie money. In 1945, he did his first stage play in 15 years. He quit after 6 weeks because of depression and his health. In 1946, he made no films. He isolated himself except for Hepburn and his brother. Then he returned to the studio and resumed making films. In 1950, he made Father of the Bride with Joan Bennett and Elizabeth Taylor. He got an Oscar nomination. In 1951, he made Father's Little Dividend, which is not quite as funny, but it's pretty clever too. Father of the Bride, the original, so good. And the movie Father's Little Dividend, the money made by it was a fundraiser for the clinic. And a year after the construction was complete and Tracy attended the opening ceremony, Spencer addressed the crowd, said, "You honor me because I'm a movie star, a movie actor, a star in Hollywood terms. That's nothing I've ever done that can match what Louise has done for deaf children and their parents." He became a free agent. He left MGM. Hemingway did not like him in Old Man and the Sea. Well, that's okay, because I didn't like the book Old Man and the Sea. In 1960, he was nominated for the movie Inherit the Wind. He got 8 nominations for Judgment at Nuremberg. That was good, too. Hepburn and Tracy were an open secret under the radar. Not much is really known about them, but the rumors. It long was believed that Louise wouldn't give him a divorce, and this is not true. Tracy wouldn't divorce her because of this Catholicism. But that image helped the success of the clinic. Hepburn was fine. She didn't want to get married. She had an egalitarian relationship with him, and that's the way she wanted to keep it. In her memoir in 1991, she said, "We did what he liked. We lived life which he liked. I struggled to change all the qualities I felt he didn't like. Some of them, which I thought were my best, I thought he found irksome. I removed them, squelched them as far as I was able." That doesn't sound egalitarian to me. His health and appearance deteriorated because of the alcohol. His last movie was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967. His daughter was played by Hepburn's niece, Katherine Houghton. I didn't know that. Because of his death, he was uninsurable. Because of his health, he was uninsurable. He used his own money to insure himself. While filming, there was a lot of stress that he wouldn't live to finish the film. He was in such bad health. On the last day, he said he had a monologue that was done over a period of days, but he could only work for a couple of hours at a time. When it was over, he said to Stanley Kramer, the director, "Well, Stanley, now if I drop dead, you've got it." And he was so pleased, so glad, so relieved. Spencer was just ebullient, brimming over with joy. Stanley was too, and they both wept. And I misspoke. Kramer, is the one who insured Tracy himself. June 10th of 67, he had a heart attack at his house with Hepburn. He reached out to Louise. Hepburn reached out to Louise to be friends. Louise said, "I thought you were only a rumor." Seriously? Hepburn was wounded. "Some rumor," she said. "Spencer's the guilty one. She was the sufferer. I had not broken up their marriage. That happened long before I arrived on the scene." Luella Parsons called it the greatest love story never told. He got nominated posthumously. Hepburn won. Louise was honored much for her philanthropy. She died in 1983. The clinic has benefited 25,000 families a year. Hepburn spoke publicly about Tracy after Louise died. Hepburn died June 29th, 2003, at the age of 96. She's called the greatest female star in Hollywood history by the American Film Institute. And their son John died in 2007. And when Burt Reynolds was getting a start in the business, he befriended Tracy while the two were working at the same studio. One day, Burt turned to his idol and said, "Mr. Tracy, you're so good at everything. Is there anything you're not good at?" To which Tracy replied, "Life." Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm trying for a little light distraction here during difficult times, and go back and watch some of those movies. Watch the original Father of the Bride. It is genius. It's very different from the modern remake, and it is genius. I don't remember which Harlow movie I liked the best. I can't really remember. And all the Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn movies are really good, but they're very gendered. I will say that. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And thank you so much to Sara. Her writing is just wonderful. And she did a lot of work here. So thank you very much, Sara. And Slán go foil. Slánte.